Okay, I believe we're recording. Hello everyone, hola, welcome back to Soul Mechanics. Here we are. I'm gonna have to venture to guess that this may likely be the end of our first official documentation of my crazy experiment. I made it to 9 days before, and I had to because what I'm seeking through this, there are a few things I'm trying to achieve here. Which, mind you, we are right now, the sun just set on day 7. So I made it to 9 before, and I had to because as I was saying, there's 3 particular things that I'm trying to achieve with this. 1, obviously I'm trying to unlock the other part and become aware. The more that I do this, the more aware I become ordinarily of these aspects of personality, how they affect people, how they affect me particularly, how they affect everything. And this is what allows for me to make use of spotcasting and be an effective director, because I know how certain values are going to affect people at certain times in certain ways. Like, I'm able to see ahead. I'm able to move really fast in the sense that I'm able to see ahead and affect things, far into the future, and kind of plot things out and be, to some extent, certain of their happening when I need for them to, when we need for them to. Which I am, in fact, always working to be helpful to everybody that is in any way involved with me, especially if somebody's consistently involved with me directly. I am on your side. That is, in fact, my biggest fucking problem, is that I'm constantly doing everything to help every fucking buddy but me. But so there's some things that I do require, specifically at this moment, or in these times rather, during these experiments. I require certain resources, as I said, certain, they're not really, everything's made of chemicals for the most part. Anything that has an effect on you in any way is going to be chemical in some way or another, but I mean, these are just natural herbs and shit. They're not drugs as you would think of them, although technically they are drugs. But I do require these to maintain, at the very least, my ability to continue even attempting to do this, because it would just, I really should have dropped by now. I should not be able to continue, even with that impulse, that Kundalini rolling. I don't expect that I should be able to even survive this. But some people say, if God wanted me dead, he'd have done it a long time ago. Well, in my case, I can say, if God didn't need me alive, I'd have been dead several times over by now. I wouldn't have made it through my teens, for fuck's sake. I was dead back then, for sure. And there was a point in my life where I had decided I was done. It was so bad. Everything was fine. I felt like I had no point in living, no future. And this was even into my training, when I was already pretty well aware of a lot of what I know. Well, actually, that my understanding, my comprehension is gone so fucking far beyond anything I could have conceived before. I don't even know how far I've come, honestly. Everything's become so bizarrely protracted anymore. It's just, I am, in fact, I speak to us living in differing worlds, some of us, we truly are. And for me, literally right now, where I'm at, you're watching me on YouTube, I'm out in the ether here. There are things happening all around me right now that, even I would not be aware of ordinarily. But as I do this more, that kind of tunes into my brain, and it becomes used to doing that, and so it picks up on these things, just like there are constant radio waves and shit going around, but your brain, tunes them out. I guess most people are going to go ahead and think that, well, your brain can't pick up on these things. That's why, they can move through the air and you have no idea they're there. Firstly, you can hear them with your ears. I do all the time. So yeah, you can pick up on them. And B, what exactly would lead you to believe that your brain is not designed to pick up on a signal that it creates? That's going to be a tricky question. Go ahead and think about that one. Why the fuck would your brain not be able to tune into something that it produced? Who do you think made the radio? You did. So, I mean, yeah, your brain can pick up on anything. It's just it tunes certain things out to make life easier, to make things more manageable, to focus essentially on what needs to be focused on, or what matters, you know, what you decide matters. But you can train it to pick up on more, because there's a lot more happening. There's a lot you're unaware of. There's a lot most of us, some people will never be aware of, I think. Well, I mean, technically speaking. Again, ultimately, we're eventually going to be realized. That's what I'm personally hypothesizing is the purpose of the game. And so it's like becoming a realized person, like becoming actualized and becoming something that is essentially like a god, immortal, like the idea of a god. I like to think, as I've stated before, that like the deal with what God is, in a sense, is kind of like this romance that you're separated from this greater soul, that you're divided by this illusion, but it's like a love affair where you come together and you fall apart, and you come together and you meet up for moments at a time, so that several times that's how it feels to me. And you see it sometimes, you see it presenting in the world and in things, and sometimes it comes in very clearly, but it's always speaking to you. The world is always communicating with you. These values are always presenting, and every one of these values is a piece of that ultimate psyche. Like, there is technically one personality, one identity, but it's fractured into so many pieces, and each one of them are technically one personality. Please, dude, like, it's only when I'm making the video she's gonna climb up here and do that. Come on, man. Somebody else already like screwed me over today. Was I speaking about the resources? I don't have the resources I require to even try to continue, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and venture to guess it. I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna quit with this run of the experiment. So if you guys don't hear from me again via the video or online or whatever, I didn't technically give up, but I did quit, and I just need some rest. Anyways, so I'm already getting lost. Values clump together again, they become shards of personalities that become greater personalities that eventually evolve into a person, and it's like they create this system, this organic system of, you know, of course it comes from the womb, the fetus grows into a person, that the values that come into play form it via what we think of as being morphogenic fields or morphogenetic fields. I can never remember which one is right. But it's something Rupert Sheldrake came up with. He found this idea, and I'm pretty sure it's correct. It seems perfectly plausible and works. But basically the idea is that like the aura that you have is going to be a kind of symmetry that's created by the values in play, and it directs the functionality of your organic construction. So evolution is guided by these morphogenic fields that come, they're kind of like emotional fields for the most part. Emotion is going to be the battery, the charge. Emotion is generally considered to be the reality that we are actually working with, and everything else is just kind of representing that. So it's difficult to say whether values are emotions. They seem like, it seems more like emotions are attached to values, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. What I want to get to is this conversation that I had. That's the important part, because obviously the first thing, as I was saying, is tuning in and training myself to pick up on these things and become more effective in that manner. Two is to try and fuse those personalities, most specifically the feminine personality that I have locked away, that I really want to bring out into the world and express, because it's difficult for me to do now that I've been conditioned for so long to hide that. It's no longer like a viable potentiality. I have to really work at that, making that work. So it's like I am programmed to stop myself. I can't figure it out, but I'm getting there. Anyways, the third thing is these visions that I have. Once you reach a certain point and those symptoms all begin to cascade and everything begins to get to be so much, and you actually move through that panic mode into the state wherein your brain actually like clicks over. This is very similar to using dimethyltryptamine, wherein it's effectively a chemical trigger that's tricking the brain into thinking that you're dying, and it effectively produces what amounts to a temporary kind of synthetic NDE, near-death experience, where you sort of cross over into whatever lies beyond that boundary, which I realize now through this particular envisionment. We'll get to that in a moment, but I don't really think that reaching the boundary is really a potentiality in a manner of speaking. I'll try to explain that later. I don't have the time right now, but so what was I saying? Yeah, once all those symptoms cascade, it effectively it produces the same sort of effect as dimethyltryptamine, where your brain thinks pretty much, fuck, I'm dead, and then you kind of click over into that world, and you have this. I at least I haven't spoken to anybody else who's practiced this sort of thing. I don't think anybody's thought to try it really that I know of, but I've talked to a lot of psychonauts and presented this, and nobody has a clue what I'm talking about. So I don't think anybody's even really thought about this, but it seems to be one of the most effective measures I could find in all my years of practice. So, I mean, I've tried everything. So, I mean, almost everything, not like shitty shit. I've never tried like heroin or anything like that. I mean, drug-wise, never mind. That's not, stop doing that, dude. Fuck. I have to reprimand myself now because he's separate from me in a sense. When I get into these visionary states wherein I click over, I literally feel as though I become another separated entity from myself, as though I can speak to myself from some higher perspective, like I fuse with that higher self as that oversoul, that daemon character, in a manner of speaking. It's like I become the most actualized person. You know, the highest standard of this particular personality, this particular me, in a manner of speaking. And I'm actually capable of relaying information from that frame of reference, that perspective, very easily and openly. And so what transpired in this particular instance with this, I actually did reach that visionary state this time. It happened the other night, but the way it happened was like delayed, because I had that conversation that I spoke of in the previous video, but it began to unfold after I mentioned it and began to think about it, and it opened up into this greater visionary experience that I need to try and package and get across as best as I can here in this video. So bear with me here. Just if you need to watch it over again or whatever, I'm just going to try and fucking run it through as fast as I can, because I'm not sure how much space I have. So what happened is that I had a few plot points, a few things that I really wanted to do. I was really excited about doing, in particular, this time during the course of the experiment. Certain things I needed to do at certain times for certain reasons, just in order to enjoy myself. And every single one of these things, as soon as it wasn't like something that kind of wrecked it, like maybe it would start raining and then I was like, oh, well, now I can't go outside because I'm going to get rained on or something like that. It was more like natural disaster sort of occurrences would kick in immediately where I tried. Like I actually did get outside and it was a perfect night. I went to where I needed to go. I had I got ready to do what I had wanted to do. It was like 3 in the morning. I'm all alone in the middle of the night. Everything's open up. I'm able to go out and do the training that I wanted to get done. And as soon as I got ready to do it and laid out my shit too, I lost a bunch of good like clothing and shit that I had laid out for these purposes. A fucking leather jacket, you know, leather pants that are protective of your legs, like leather armor suit I lost because it just started fucking tsunami downpouring on me the moment I set that shit down. Like that sort of thing happened every single instance. And I started to get kind of upset. I turned to my idea of God, which I talk to myself in my head all the time. I have conversations with myself to work things out. I'm sure everybody does this from time to time, but I do it a lot just to work out my issues and my problems and to think about things. I kind of think out loud. I talk to myself, deliberately engaging in a conversation in order to get to the bottom of things, and I think of that as being God, because usually it turns out to be absolutely correct. It knows a lot more than I do, this voice in the back of my head, this conscience, so I'm going to go ahead and think that that's pretty much the same idea of what God is supposed to be. It's engaging me, it's directing me, it's giving me guidance, so there you go. No difference, right? So that's what I usually think of as being God, in a manner of speaking, or at least the voice of God kind of speaking to me. Obviously, I've stated that values are speaking to you in the world all the time, and that as well is the voice of God in my mind, but precisely I'm speaking to having conversations with myself in this regard, which makes me seem absolutely crazy, but then again, doesn't everything else I've said. I mean, honestly, fact of the matter is, I'm going to go ahead and encourage you to think that I'm crazy, because chances are I'm actually just a little bit less crazy than you are. Most people, if not every one of us, are crazy to some extent. We are all dreaming. The purpose of this experiment is to become aware of the dream so that I can kind of try and wake up in a manner, you know, to keep that in mind. I am I'm working towards a realization here. You have to be aware that you're dreaming first, the same as having a lucid dream in your sleep. You are in fact dreaming right now, and most people have not even the slightest clue as to half of what is actually transpiring in their environment in any given moment. So this is a dangerous, tricky, hazardous, but very effective way in which to become aware of these things. It's a trick, it's a brain trick. But anyways, so I started talking to God about this, my idea of God. I look up to the sky, I said, dude, you're starting to piss me off. Like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, you're sabotaging me. You're actually deliberately sabotaging everything that I want to do for no reason that I can see. And honestly, I'm beginning to think that it did it just to have this conversation. Like, it had plotted this all out in advance, and there's a reason why I think of that, and because of what it said in the conversation. This is the info I really need to get across, because thinking about this makes so much sense, and makes so much sense of everything. And so when I sat down in front of the mirror, I was all pissed off, and I looked in the mirror and I just started talking openly to myself from some other perspective, from this greater, higher perspective. And I started telling myself things, and basically what I told myself, now before I tell you what I told myself from this God perspective, this higher self perspective, I want to say that most people seem to have this idea of God that religion gave them, which, as I've stated so many times, modern religion went and hijacked the concept of God. There was no idea of a dictatorial rule-making enforcer of any sort before then. The elder traditions had a concept of God, or a God concept, that basically was a system of understanding, you know, more like an ethical ideology rather than a moral law. There was no judgment involved. It was pretty much, you're going to have to make the judgments yourself, but here's what we found to be the most effective way to do that. It was a system of practices, of understandings. You know, it was just a way of understanding, more like a philosophical methodology than any sort of a religion. Religion comes along and it starts telling you exactly what God is, and it's totally separated from you, and it's this specific something that you need to be paying very close attention to and worshiping. And everybody has this idea that God is like this person that somehow, now think about this. So I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, because the idea that people tend to have seemingly is that God is like this old man, usually an old man, but whatever it is, a goddess, whatever it happens to be, even if it's like some kind of spirit or oversoul or anything. The idea seems to be that God has like a plan, a schematic worked out for everything, and everything that happens, God is making it happen for a reason all the time, and it's all been mapped out in advance, and like God kind of built existence, all time, and the universe and everything in some kind of like supernatural laboratory or factory somewhere, you know, some metaphysical factory that God sat down and drew up the schematic for everything. Now, really think about that. Where would anybody ever get such a ridiculous idea, and how can anybody reconcile that as being in any way reasonable or feasible to any extent whatsoever? Like, that does not make any sense at all. What does make sense is what it said to me. Pretty much, it said to me, myself speaking to me from this perspective. I didn't know where exactly this was coming from. It just came to me. It spoke to me in the mirror, face to face, and it said, you know, I don't really make these things happen so much as you do. I'm not really, it told me, like, I'm going to kind of shorten this. I'm not going to say it exactly. It's not verbatim, but this is pretty much the plot points of it. It says that I'm not really any different from you, especially you. Speaking of me, it said, you know, you're a director, and what you do with this spot casting system that you've come up with, and how you make use of that, and what other directors do, especially those you've trained with or trained for or under people you have trained or trained under, who practice the same thing and direct other people. You know, you can see ahead to a certain extent, because you can calculate the potentialities of what's going to happen, and you can actually orchestrate synchronicities. You can make things happen for people, but you don't really know for certain if it's going to work out the way that you want for it to, and you never know whether the way that you want for it to work out will be the best way or not, but you do care enough to try and do your best. You have enough respect to be considerate of everybody involved and do the best you can for everybody, and you really put everything you've got into making that work. Now, it says that I'm exactly the same as you, except in my case, I wasn't born with parents to teach me how to live or to give me their ways. I never had anyone guiding me, so I had to figure everything out from a point of scratch, where God, basically waking up in nothing, having no idea what it even is or what it's supposed to do, having to work out how physics even operates. And mind you, it doesn't seem as though physics was like a schematic that God had mapped out. It seems more like physics itself was sort of like a property that existed, or like even like another something, another presence in the void, that it was already there when God showed up from wherever. God just pops out of nowhere, and it seems like there's something lurking around there, this rule, this presence that it eventually became acquainted with and learned how to make use of, and used it to create as it did, and create evolution, essentially kind of design evolution to cause for things to come into play the way they did, and eventually got around to figuring out how to make everything work the way that it has, and now pretty much does exactly the same thing that directors do, only on a much greater scale, obviously. And it even said to me, like, I do pretty much the same thing you do with life, except I'm a hell of a lot better at it, and I do it with everyone. But he said that it's very important to have people like us in play, that we are indeed as important as we would like to think we are, and that what we're doing is going to matter if we can make it work, but there's no guarantee that we can. We really have to fight for this, and we have to be working together, and we can't let each other fuck up, we can't let each other fall, we can't watch and let things pass when we have an opportunity to do something to assist each other. We need to be in play. And we need to do it now, because it's this time is where things are either going to radically change for the better or radically change for the worse. It's going to go one way or the other. Things are not going to remain the same anymore. We need to this is our shot. We have the opportunity open to us. The first wave of the initiative made damn certain that we have this opportunity available, but there needs to be more God figures in play. Every one of us. I brought myself up from fucking nothing, from being homeless, and there are people I got the one opportunity that brought me out of that hole where I figured my life was already over. I felt like I had lived enough and I was done with it. I gave up, pretty much. And I had one opportunity that was given to me by the one person I know of who doesn't give a flying fuck what I do and doesn't listen to a word I say, and can't even comprehend most of what I try to tell him, and doesn't care to find out. Yet he gave me a shot. I took it. I got out of the hole. I got out of being fucking homeless and with no hope and no reason to live, and addicted to alcohol and whatnot. And I built the initiative, and granted, it's not this giant thing yet. The channel's not fucking huge. Nothing's really working out as well as I would really like for it to. It's not seemingly moving as fast as other people's organizations do, but then other people's organizations are based on ridiculous joke nonsense that doesn't actually matter so much, like video game stuff, or talking about the latest celebrity gossip. This is actually important, so it's likely going to be a hell of a lot more difficult, and it's much greater and more. I am much prouder of having this responsibility, certainly, than running some corporate sort of thing. But it is, as it said to me, it is very important. Don't ever think that it's not. This needs to be happening, and we need more organizations like our faction of the initiative. We need to be bringing them together. We need to be networking. And as I said, granted, it's not such a great thing. Our faction, at least, is not, blowing up, and most of the people that are involved with it aren't even so involved with it. They don't even care so much. I guess most of them don't even really know what to think of it yet. But it is pretty awesome. It is pretty fucking successful for one person who just figured out how to use the internet 2 years ago and has done all of this with it and managed to put all these people together. Mind you, we have many groups working with us now that most of us aren't, like only the directives really aware of, even half of the groups that we're working with. But there is a lot involved with us that I am directing. It's not just our little group here. So it is actually pretty. Now that I think about it, it's pretty fucking hugely successful, and I did all of that on my own. The point being that every single one of you has that power available. You just have to make that decision. Step up and play. Every one of you has a God within you. And again, there are various versions of what people like to think of God as being, but there's really 3 versions I like to think of as being true, real. And of course, there's only one true God. That's an absolute situation. That is a truth. That is the absolute situation. Whatever is really happening and the ultimate outcome. Now, every one of us has that oversoul, that higher self God, that would be our perfected identity, our greatest potentiality. The realization of our greatest self achieved. That's going to be the first stage of what God, and you can be that, you can decide to be that in any moment. Just say to yourself, excellence is a habit, and I'm going to make a habit of it every chance I get and make that work. Fight for that. Even if you don't succeed, trying is enough. It makes you perfected in the fact that you have the will and the strength and the merit of character to do that. 2, God is going to be the world speaking to you, the life that is alive in the world. And from what I can tell, pretty much it's just the radiation of your personality bouncing back at you through the myriad filters that exist, all the different mirrors, all the little shattered pieces of your identity all over the place are just communicating with each other. And that's what God is. It's communication itself. It's this webbing, this network of associations. It is networking itself, because at the bottom line of everything, and this is what I really found here, is that it is in fact the very value of division itself that makes literally everything possible. It is the one value that sustains everything. That's the value that suspends reality as we know it. And yes, we are fighting against division as we know it in sociality, but division at its core, it's not really an enemy. It is our greatest ally, and we're going to learn how to make use of that. I haven't given a hell of a lot of thought to it, but it's an astounding revelation in and of itself. Now, the final version I like to think of, the Alpha and the Omega, is going to be whatever we become. Whatever the outcome of this is, all of this, when we finally reach that singularity of whatever sort, or we end up fulfilling the destiny of mankind itself and becoming the greatest realized version, and actually become realized in that sense, which there are various reasons I have for holding this theory in a manner of speaking, but ultimately it comes down to the time mechanics understanding of us viewing time backwards, wherein the reason for a thing, as in the outcome for an action, is what exists first, and it produces the line of values leading up to that in order to explain its existence, because we require an explanation in order for a thing to be existing. So essentially, whatever we're creating, it actually exists first. That makes it the alpha, but it is the outcome which also makes it the omega. Thereby it is, I mean, think about that for a little while. I can talk more about it, but I'm running out of time. Anyways, that's the idea I have about that. But the astounding revelation there is that, A, division is the bottom line. Division itself, the very concept of division, is in fact the suspending factor that is putting everything together. A. And B, God is not like this all-powerful, it knows everything because it's all there is to be known. It's consciousness itself. And I don't even really think that it is like everywhere omnipresent. I mean, obviously everything is a part of it, so it is everything, but at the same time I like to think that this present that I identify personally with as being God, I really like to think that it's so fucking fast that it can be there before, like it can answer a question before you've even asked it, because it's already thought that you're going to ask it, and it's there. Like, it's just so fast that it's already devised most of what's going to happen long into the future in advance, is what I'm presuming, because the idea given to me here is that it's no different than us. It's no different than a person. A person is just the latest version of it building itself, attempting to become realized in some solid material sort of fashion, so that it can actually exist as a living, breathing, feeling being, rather than just some lost, unknown darkness. Essentially, it is the darkness, as I spoke with to Juanita about. It is the darkness, as we like to think of the subconscious, the operating system, the soul, as being the subconscious. We're actually the subconscious. We're the ones who can't see all of what's happening. It is all of what's happening. So where we speak to this concept of darkness, again, it's us viewing time backwards, because what the darkness actually is our concept of a God presence. So I think that's going to have to wrap it up. I'm probably going to give up. At least I'm going to eat something finally, and I'm going to guarantee I'm going to drop immediately afterwards. So let's call it here. It's 6 days. No, it might be 7 days, actually. I did kind of misdirect you guys in a sense. When you guys were trying to convince me not to do it, some of you were pleading with me to not do it. You didn't think it was safe, and you're trying to convince me against actually going ahead with the experiment, because I said that was the day. That was actually the second or third day. That was when the symptoms actually started to present, and I realized that I had to isolate myself, or I was going to cause serious trouble amongst you. So yeah, I had already started then. which is why I couldn't agree with you and stop. And it's not like I would anyway. I'm doing this for a reason. I'm dedicated. I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna go to whatever extremes are necessary. If nobody else is gonna fucking jump into that rabbit hole, you bet your ass I'm gonna be the one to hit rock bottom and break out my shovel. We're gonna figure this thing out, and we're gonna make it work properly, and we can do that. We just have to wake up, be lucid, man. Realize what's actually happening, and realize how important you are in making this happen. Every decision you make matters to everyone around you, and you have no idea how much. It's resounding in ways you may never be aware of, but you can start to. You can start to become aware of how powerful you really are. So, yeah, I think my catchphrase here was Kila Salai, Terbe Uni Siari, which means forward together, all is one. Namaste. I see deity in you. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. We'll have another documentation at some point later on, but that's the revelation for this trip, and I'm relieved it's over. So, good night, all.